So it's a great honor to be introducing our guest speaker tonight for two reasons. One is, as many of y'all know, illegal immigration is my biggest issue. And this guy that we're getting ready to introduce is not only a good friend, but he works for an organization that is hands down, the most effective group fighting illegal immigration in the whole country. There's no doubt about that. And I'm going to have something to show you here in a minute about that. But Jim Robb, actually, despite the fact that he lives up in the Washington, D.C. area, actually grew up in Texas. He went to Asbury Christian College, just south of Lexington, Kentucky. And shortly after graduating, you started an evangelical publishing house where you worked for a number of years until the Republicans kind of took back control of Congress back in 1994. He moved to D.C. because he wanted to do something for the country, and he felt very passionate about that. Shortly after that, within maybe a year, he ran into a good friend of his that also used to work in the Christian publishing world, named Roy Beck. And maybe y'all may know him. He's the gumball guy. How many of y'all seen the gumball video? So anyway, so Roy Beck and Jim Robb hooked up, and they came up with Numbers USA. They were founded around 1996. By 2004, they had about 50,000 members, and by then they've always been on the forefront of technology on how to put pressure on Congress. It began with the faxing system, or maybe even before that with some internet videos, but it began with the faxing system. At one point, I'm not sure if they've done this lately, do you realize that 60% of the faxes that go into D.C. are from Numbers USA, which is tremendous. And I just told you that in 2004, there were around 50,000 members. But if you all recall, how many of y'all recall the Comprehensive Immigration Bill, the McCain bill, in 2007? So when that happened, and I think that has something to do with driving up your membership, right before that vote, they actually went from 50,000 to 447,000 members. And if you recall, on June 28th, 2007, primarily because of what they were doing and because of what some of y'all were doing, sending in faxes, that thing died. And I just wanted to show, where's the cord? As you know, New York Times is not really friendly to our viewpoint on illegal immigration, but this is what they wrote about a week after that bill was killed in the Senate. When a comprehensive immigration bill collapsed last month on the Senate floor, it was a victory for a small group that had been lobbying Congress for a decade to reduce the number of immigrants, legal and illegal, in the United States. That's the New York Times actually giving primary credit for defeating that bill to this organization. So anyway, it's a great honor to introduce my friend Jim Robb to tell you about this amazing organization. And I'm hoping, how many of y'all are actually signed up to receive their emails? How many are not? Okay, what I'm hoping, and this is a little agenda that I think that Julie and I share, we hope that you're so impressed with what you're going to hear and what they're doing that when you leave tonight, my wife is going to be handing out some cards. It's real simple. You just take one of their cards when you get home and don't forget about it. Sign up to get their emails. It's the easiest, most user-friendly way of sending free faxes into Congress that there is, and it's a phenomenal bunch of information. Thank you. Jim Robb.
Good evening. I'm Jim Robb from Numbers USA. We are in Arlington, Virginia, but I was raised in West Texas, Abilene, Midland, Lubbock. So you know about that. My father was a Methodist evangelist. I was raised in a very conservative home, and I'm doing conservative work now. So I've got some notes which I might think to look at, but I might not. So we've had 7 years of Obama. How's that working for you? It's been long, hasn't it? Long 7 years. Yeah. It's been like a terrible nightmare. So obviously, Numbers USA who knows about Numbers USA? At least a little bit. Okay, some of you don't. All right. So we'll introduce a few people tonight, but Numbers USA is an organization that stands for two things. One, the elimination of illegal immigration. And secondly, the reduction of overall immigration back to traditional American numbers, right? Traditional numbers. which are more like 400,000 or 500,000 a year. Does anyone know how many immigrants we take legally into the United States each year? 1.1 million, that's right. Plus all the illegal immigrants. So when Roy and I and a couple of other people started Numbers USA, going on 20 years ago, we said, man, we were looking at the charts, looking at the numbers and saying, well, I don't know how much longer we can take this rate of change. We got it right? Some of us were saying that 20 years ago. How many immigrants have been admitted into the United States since the founding of Numbers USA? 25 million. That's 25 million. So this is the thing about immigration. We don't have to do anything to lose on this battle, right? You know about that, right? Because the laws are already set to push the population of the country. I'm not talking about natural increase. I'm talking about immigration from present 318 million to past 600 million by the end of this century. All the growth will be from immigrant population. Now, if everything were ideal in the country, that might be fine, but things are not ideal. For example, there are no jobs. Minor problem, right? So I like to say that immigration is not the most important issue. It's the issue that determines all the other issues, right? Some of you know what I'm talking about there? Okay. Real briefly, let's talk about Paul Ryan. Okay, all right. Let's talk about, all right, Paul Ryan and Mitch McConnell, right? So now, if you were like me, because I'm a lifelong Republican, conservative Republican, I've spent a good deal of personal treasure, a lot of work on my own, where Numbers USA is nonpartisan, trying to get a conservative Republican Congress, right? I mean, how many checks have you written for that? How many calls have you made? How many blocks have you walked to get a conservative Republican Congress or something like that? And what good has that done so far? Right? It's revolutionized the country, got conservative principles going, borders are all taken care of. Why is that? Is Paul Ryan, he was a famous famous conservative, right? So, I mean, that's a reputation. So why is it that, before I start talking about immigration, I just feel moved to say, why is it Republicans never win policy? Republicans are good at winning elections. You come to a forum like this, it's all about elections, policy, but elections. But what if we win all the elections? Does a policy necessarily change? It does not. And I know at the Tea Party, that was one of the reasons the Tea Party was created, right? Because that happened, and it continues to happen. For one thing, you can't, I agree with the critics within the party say you can't just have some parts of the government. That really is true. You have to look at the overall thing. In the whole last 200 years, the whole politics of the world's been shifting left. More government control, right? And that's been happening during our entire lifetimes. Is that correct? Most of you agree with that statement? Yeah. And it's really hard to change that because now, really, even though the Congress sometimes has a little bit of a correction, mostly we're going on momentum. The other side's got the laws they need, right? They don't need any more laws. I mean, every time they can get a law, they get another law. Throw in an Obamacare here and I don't know what the latest travesty is. Mostly it's done by executive orders now, right? So, but they don't really need anything. They're where they need to be. So to get conservative policies, a lot has to change. A whole lot has to change. So every election's really important, but maybe this one will be even more important if we can get someone at the very top who's really ready to entertain some radical change, because what Republicans do is work on the next election. That's what Republicans do in Washington. That's the main job of the professional Republicans. Whereupon the Democrats They see their job is to affect policy now because they don't know when they're going to be thrown out. But Republicans that get a little bit of power will stay in power because sometime in the future, it's all gonna pay off, right? Does that sound right to anybody? Okay, that's grim. That's all very depressing. But I'm just saying why it's, I wonder myself, people are constantly asking me, hey, we spent all that money, how come nothing ever changed? Okay, but there's a lot of reasons for it, but it's basically Republicans don't change things. Republicans are basically conservative in the sense that they want to keep things the same. But we can't keep things the same. We got to change a lot of things because the momentum is all against us. Okay. Let's just talk a little bit about Numbers USA. Gee, I sure want to get on a more cheerful note than what I'm on so far. Because Republican Party, even though I am a Republican, can make me, really get grim in a hurry. They're kind of a maddening bunch, aren't they? How do I get this going? Let's see. This is supposed to be a slideshow. Anyone know how to get this onto a slideshow? There we go. This is Numbers USA. The organization was started 19 plus years ago as a website. How many of you ever been on the Numbers USA website? How many get emails from Numbers USA? How many would admit that they've gotten any emails from me? Okay. Fewer numbers, fewer and fewer. Uh-oh. Okay. Well, I told you what the aims of Numbers USA are, and I'll go a little bit more why as we get to it. I just want to do a little bit of overview on what it is we're trying to or how we work. This is something we call our action board. Those of you who are registered on Numbers USA will have seen this. Here's post on the left. If you go onto our action board, you're a Numbers USA member. Clickety-click, you go, maybe we sent you an email, go and send a fax to someone. Anyone seen this before? You go on here, you may see a little Post-it note, says send a fax, make a phone call, right? And then on the right here, we have something called our congressional grade cards, which can, as I'm constantly told, are not perfect. They're really not perfect, but they do have a sort of virtue, because here are my 3 congressmen, or my congressman and 2 senators in Virginia, where I live, and they've got F-minuses in immigration. And so we grade every single immigration action of anyone as long as they've been in Congress. So we've been grading immigration votes since 1990, and nothing's ever forgotten. And so one thing we do is help give guidance to voters on how to communicate with Congress. If you go on to their individual grades, you find out why they're graded the way they are at every single vote. Let's see. Here, if you want to send a fax, I'll tell a little bit more about faxing. But if you send a fax, you have a little form here. You can choose from some statements we make, or you can write some of your own content as well, and you write a PS, etc. And then here's the PS. And then here's a preview. It comes, see, you have it's coming from you. And okay, I'll talk about that in a minute. Since our founding, we invented free faxing to Congress. So most of you have heard of free faxing to Congress, right? For various issues. It's been now used by many, many organizations, thousands of organizations, in fact. But it started with Numbers USA. And our organization, our members have sent a total of about 35 million faxes to Congress over our history. So most of the faxes they're getting are from Numbers USA members saying lower immigration, but mostly in recent years, beef up the borders, stop the executive amnesty, all the things we have to get into. And now, of course, refugees, terrorists coming into the country, all the many, many horrible, horrible things that are happening. Let me talk a little bit about Facebook. We've got a big Facebook effort. Our email list, which a lot of you are on, I think, is over 1 million. It's about 1.5 million. So we email a lot of people. But the big movement in recent years has been into social media, and for us especially, Facebook. Here's a post that ran in this week on our one of our two Facebook pages. We have 1.7 million, I think, on this page that is fans. Nearly 1 in 5 jobs in America is now held by an immigrant. Share if you think Congress should start putting Americans first. Let's see. Can we even read this type up there? I could read it on this screen. It says 1.9 million people reached. This was no advertising money. No advertising money. We put it up on the page. 144,000 reactions, likes, comments, or shares, and including 48,000 shares. So if 48,000 people share it with their 500 best buds, you're going to get some pretty big numbers. That's sort of how the outreach goes. In the last 28 days, I just looked as I was on the plane coming here, we've had 100 million of these things seen by different people in the United States. And I think that's 25 million unique people. So a good percentage of the United States population is seeing messages from us on a regular basis. I got one more I was showing. 2 refugees in the U.S. were arrested for supporting terrorist groups. When was that? Last night? Yes, day before? Right? Was that in Philadelphia? Houston. Really? It was in Houston? This is like, when was that? When did it happen? The other day, right. Okay, so this was just put up a couple of days ago, and that's at 1,091,000 people have seen this so far. So, now, this is a maddening thing. I know all of you were very upset about this. Congress has passed a $1.1 trillion spending bill that funds, 1, Congress's plan to bring 10,000 refugees to the U.S., 2, sanctuary cities that protect criminal illegal aliens, and 3, quadruples the H-2B foreign worker visas. Now, there are many kinds of foreign worker visas. H-2B is for casual labor. It's like resorts and stuff like that. So they're quadrupling that. So that means all the Americans who now work in that industry will be forced out by people who are undercutting them on price. That's the whole purpose of it, right? There's no other purpose. And so these people come in, they're not on a citizenship track. They're coming in just to undercut the people who work there. So Walt Disney parks, instead of being a third to a half, immigrant visas will be, or foreign visas will be all foreign visas if this continues. So everybody knows about Walt Disney laying off their information technology workers, right? Okay. Do you have a question? No, go right ahead. The H-2B visas? No, they're not. This is one of the visa kinds that's not an immigrant visa. It's an employment visa, but still people manage to beat that system. Okay, I'm going to get to some issues. I'll just tell just a little bit more. These are just like means and methods. So I've got a little more interesting stuff here. This is something that's just 5 hours ago, as of when I copied this earlier today. Cruz explains his plans for illegal aliens already here. Strong E-Verify, entry-exit visa tracking, enforce the law, et cetera. So who heard about this policy coming out? That was yesterday. So this is a real good plan that Cruz has put out. And he's joined Rick Santorum, who's put out a tremendous plan, and Trump has put out a tremendous plan. So the good news is the presidential race shaping up to make things maybe different than ever before. We'll talk about that a little bit more. This is a little bit more, this is Sessions and Cruz today, I think, issuing a letter to excoriate the administration on stonewalling on another 41 terrorists, as another 41 terrorists are identified in the U.S. So there's about 100 terrorists that have been identified in the U.S. From some sort of immigrant visa, and that the Congress has asked the administration to send over the information so we can take a look, but they have not done so. So this is what we've got after 7 years of Obama. just want to say a couple of other things on this. Yeah, so, right, so this is the presidential grade cards. This is on our site. You can go there. Now, you can see that the Democrats in the race are not looking so good on our grade card. But it's funny, but it's also like horrible funny, right? Because each of these people on the left are saying that they will be much more radical than Obama. They've had a bidding war on how much more radical they will be. So they're all in some variety of complete open borders, right? If they get their way, we will have the immigration problems we've had so far, including the refugees, terrorism. This is just a scratch compared to the big gashing tear there's going to be if a Democrat is elected, because they've already told us what they're going to do. And you can read it right on here. Click on one of their names and you'll get that. Trump and Cruz both have a really good plan. Santorum has the most detailed and best plan. And right, but any conceivable any Republican would be a million times better than the Democrats running this year. So this is really a kind of a binary election, because the worst Republican up here, even Jeb Bush, would at least not be a lurch to the left, right, from what we're doing now. But any of the Democrats they can't wait to turn the country more into the voting bloc that they want, just basically what it's about, right? Okay, do I have any other slides? And here's a kind of a drill down of the presidential grade cards. Okay, now that's it. So I'm going to close this. But that wasn't good enough. Okay. All right. Lobbying in Washington, the way we do is it's a hard slog. We wouldn't have any chance at all if we didn't have you, our members, right? Because we are outspent more than 100 to 1 in Washington. Did you know that there were reports were made after the Gang of Eight bill came to prominence that the other side, meaning the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, the National Council of La Raza, the National Association of Manufacturers, many others, had raised $1.5 billion to get comprehensive immigration reform passed. So that's they had thought that they were completely unable. They thought that we would be rolled as a matter of course. In fact, they got all the media to report, including Fox TV, to report that it was a done deal. You might remember when Fox was reporting that story early in 2013. So, but it wasn't a done deal because there were millions of Americans who really had other ideas and had a way of expressing their opinion to Congress. So we slammed them with faxes. We slammed them with hundreds of thousands of telephone calls, meaning you called and we gave you a way to call, had toll-free numbers, told people what to say, and they said it. So the number one way to influence Congress today is phone calls. But they're hard to get, as those of you who've tried it know. They're very, very hard to get someone to make that phone call. People are afraid to make a phone call. A lot of people, or they've just never done it, they don't know how to do it. So this is one thing that's been a specialty with us. In the 2007 fight with the Senate on that amnesty, we managed to do something that's really hard to do. We shut down the congressional switchboard for a couple of times, and Senator Jeff Sessions ran to the floor and said, "Numbers USA has just shut down the congressional switchboard. We've got to do something." And of course, he was trying to kill the bill, but and that succeeded, so that thing failed. But then back in 2013 and 14, it was really just the same thing over again, except the Gang of Eight bill. You know about the Gang of Eight bill, right? That's a famous name, right? Rubio and his allies, that would have tripled immigration over the next decade. It would have been a comprehensive amnesty. Every category of immigration would have increased, and they invented several more categories for which they did not even have numbers, right? It was numbers to be determined. So this would have been like a disaster, it would have been a complete loss had that passed. But fortunately, because of our members, we were able to get it stopped in the House, even though it did pass the Senate. So that was a great victory. It's a kind of depressing thing, right, to always be fighting on the defense. I know you in the Tarrant County Tea Party know what I mean, right? Because we're always fighting to keep something worse from happening. And we got to go on the offensive as soon as we're able, and to actually get some good laws. And I know you're working on that in Texas. Okay, that's enough about process. Let's talk about just a few of the issues. And so you had a lot of candidates tonight, so I don't have as much time as I would have liked. But I do want to talk about the ICE agent lawsuit and the 26th state lawsuit. You were aware when Obama came in that he started suppressing the ICE, the ICE agency and ordering the agents not to deport people, right? I mean, you've all heard that, right? And that's true. So the Border Patrol been ordered not to deport people once they crossed. Now, if they got them at the border, they still return them. But if they got into the interior, that becomes more the ICE territory, right? Immigration control and enforcement. The order started coming through a few years ago from the head of Homeland Securities to that we're not going to get the people in jail. We're not going to get the people who fall into the hands of the police and deport them. Instead, we're going to deport the hardcore criminals. So what happened is that not only did overall deportations go down, but actually they started releasing hardcore criminals as well. You've heard about this, have you not? Tens of thousands of felons released into the U.S. population. And you remember Giuliani, when he took over New York, he started working on the broken window theory. You've heard about the broken window theory? And so that's a theory that says if you let one broken window stand in a neighborhood, now there's no way it does anything about the broken window in a house. Pretty soon, broken windows start taking over the neighborhood, and you've got a slum, right? And actually that does happen. And he said, we're not going to let anything like that happen in New York in the future. We're not going to let people jump over turnstiles and just get away, not putting their token in. We're going to stop it all. We're going to stop the handy white guys, right, on the cars. And New York kind of cleaned up, right, for a number of years. Immigration, the same thing. When they decided only someone who was like a 15-time murderer would ever be deported, and these other people are all good family people, and we're going to give them all a pass, what happened? The hardened criminals started getting in more and more, right? They stayed in more and more. And then we got to policies like the sanctuary cities, which we'd been warning about forever, right? But then Kate Steinle gets murdered in San Francisco this summer, and you know how and then it's a horrible national scandal. But it was always a scandal. We just weren't talking about it. But now we are. That's good. That's progress. Here's what I think caused the good news is immigration and is now about the biggest issue, right, in the race. And how that happened, I think, is that Ann Coulter released her book on immigration. Did anyone see that? See the book? Did someone read it? Adios America. Did some of you read that? Yeah. And it was a very powerful book. And oh, hello. And when we read that, we brought her on to Numbers USA and did a webcast with that. But of course, she had all the publicity she needed. Of course, everyone was calling her a complete nutcase, except for some of us who realized that this was good research. She was telling what was happening and crime. And then Kate Steinle gets murdered. And around the same time, Donald Trump announces for president, and he bases his whole campaign around the wall and illegal immigration. Fortunately, we had some people like Cruz and Santorum also running for president. And this was the year, partly because of the immigration issue, that they all came to the fore instead of being knocked back and all the institutionalists who you would have expected to have been dominated the issue dominating. So this has been the year of immigration politics, and where people are asking themselves some really tough questions. America's having a debate. Do we want everyone into America? Is it true that everyone's the same? Is it okay to bring people in because they're uneducated, poor, and skillless, but they are a little cheaper? Is that a good idea for America? You know, Texas is hooked on illegal labor. Many people, many of my friends in Texas, I'm a Texan, so I'm here all the time, and they're for what Numbers USA does in principle, but they happen to hire a lot of illegals working in their various businesses, and they always have a version to tell me. And I have someone in my family, this describes as well, that they couldn't be in business at all, so they're forced to hire illegal aliens, right? So we're hooked on this. Nationally, we're hooked. So we're saving a quarter, we're saving 50 cents. We say it's life or death, we can't help it. And then we've done a couple of things. First, we've really kind of brought in another minority and kind of fired the one we already had, because that was a little cheaper, a little easier. But we're not asking ourselves the question of what happens when the people that don't have the jobs now, don't have any money, they're all on welfare, who are displaced, right? Now, does the Hispanic population that comes in, they're working a little bit less, and have I heard it a million times, they all work, they work hard. Well, that's kind of true, but I live on a block that has a lot of immigration on my block. Some of my wife's and I's best friends are immigrants, and we have some of these discussions around the dining table, and they're not always that comfortable, but we have them. But so people come in, they work, but you know what? Because they actually came in because they're cheap. That's the reason that they were brought in and allowed and encouraged to be in America. Turns out they're poor now. Well, gee, of course, they're like the poorest people in America. So how many of them are on welfare? Well, how can they be on welfare? They're illegal immigrants because they have citizen children. So they actually have every kind of welfare there is. What's the biggest group on welfare in America? Well, one of the two biggest groups is illegal aliens who have citizen children. The numbers are astounding. Mostly, the great majority on food stamps, and most are on some form of welfare. So bargains don't look so good once you figure it all up sometimes. I mean, to me, it's kind of national insanity, really. But it looked all right when you say Hispanics, not that different from us, you know. It's not causing any kind of war or anything. Well, that's true, but it didn't stop there, right? So now we've got a refugee program that's really big. We brought in more than 1 million people in the last 10 years or 15 years, and most of them have been Muslim, right? And 95% of the current refugees are Muslim, and they come from countries that have become increasingly more and more radical. So America, well, we're not happy with it, but America gets more and more liberal, right? And that means we're more. For example, maybe this is a good example, right? Women can do pretty much anything they want in America, right? They've got lots of freedom. American women have lots of freedoms. That's all good. But we're bringing people in great numbers, great numbers from societies that are having more and more restriction against women, and then are moving back into practices that were used in the medieval ages. Never by the West. Never that repressive against women, but they're sort of, for some reason, Middle Eastern society decided it was not repressive enough already, right? So it's like this is the trend. people come here, they're not necessarily different. Some are, some aren't. The trend in radicalization is most pronounced in the second generation, not in the first generation. But put all this together, one thing that's, why do the Democrats want this? Why do Democrats want this? Votes, for one, that's one of the 2 or 3 reasons they want it. They want it for votes. They also have a core constituency of the public workers unions, right? And their whole business is government. The business of the left is government. And the Democrat Party represents the left. So the best thing they can do is get more customers for their business. How do you get more customers? You get more poor people. So I mean, we hear a lot in the immigration debate about people at the top. People are like coming in, they're highly skilled, they displace American high-tech workers. This is a tiny, tiny fraction of immigrants, right? Because most immigrant programmers are coming in or brought in. They're brought in because they're cheap. They're cheaper. They're much, much cheaper. So they're not coming in, and they're not buying a fine car and living in a big house. They're living in houses that have several people to a house. Because when your national strategy is to try to beat the third world by becoming like the third world, right? This is not a path for success for the United States into the future. How I define the immigration debate, basically, how I define it is that immigration is a front in the overall globalism struggle, right? So what do globalists want? What do they want? Any ideas? One government, that's part of what they want. But what don't they want? Well, I want no borders. Why? World economy. Right. Well, what they don't want is strong individual nation states, right? Like the United States. So that what we are is offensive to globalists, right? So they want to get, it doesn't have to be America, any country. They don't want any nation standing up to global interests. The biggest global interest is not government, like one world government. It's the economic interest of the transnational corporations and other interests like that. It's just people who are big successful, they're 1%ers, they're much further at the top. They don't want anything messing with their power and money, et cetera. And sure, but that means a lot of people have to pay. Everyone here is familiar with I've got 5 minutes. I haven't gotten to a single question. Everyone's familiar with the fact that the middle class is shrinking, right? And now that used to be like right-wing talk, like we would say things like that. But now the government, everyone's in agreement. Democratic Party's in agreement. Everyone's in agreement. So why has that happened? A lot of reasons, but one reason it's happened is that Americans of middle education, middle income, not that much money in the bank, have had trouble getting jobs in the new economy, right? There's a lot of reasons for that, but one big reason is too much competition. So someone who loses their job in their 50s today, very little hope of getting a job at the same level ever again. Is that right? Does that ring true with anyone? Yeah, very little hope of ever again getting a job at that same level. 4 minutes. Is that 4 minutes and there's no questions? That's the end of the program? Or is that 4 minutes and I stop talking? There's a couple of questions. It's going to 8:30. I didn't realize it's that late now. May not have time for any questions, but I'll be available to answer any questions down here because this is really complicated stuff, and I know a lot of people who've heard about it, news headlines and commentators. It's really complicated. How does it impact what we're doing? How does it impact Texas? Hey, and why is there no E-Verify law in Texas? I thought this was a conservative state. Who? I know it, because of a grocery chain in the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. Right, but you know, if there was an E-Verify bill in Texas, the border would, I mean, the wall would, I mean, borders and walls or whatever variation of it is here would still be necessary, but until there's E-Verify and you know who it is you're hiring, none of it's going to work. And E-Verify would take like $50 to put in place because it already exists. Anybody can go on a computer screen and just, once you get your little 1-hour mandatory training, and you're in the E-Verify business for your company. I mean, nothing could be simpler. The only reason Texas doesn't have it is because Texas doesn't want it, because we're hooked on cheap labor. So what we need is, you know, if America really wants things to change in this presidential election, this congressional election, all the state elections, because the state representatives and senators have not pushed E-Verify. So, I mean, how interested are they really in changing, right? So if someone wants something to change, I always tell Texas leaders, if you want anything to change, pass E-Verify. I'll believe you want something to change when E-Verify is passed. But the issue kind of disappears in Austin, right? So if we want something to change, if America wants something to change, you can't keep putting people like Paul Ryan and calling him the conservative hope, right? We opposed him publicly. We were one of the few national organizations that kind of dared to do that, but we did. Heritage Action, some others. 1.5 minutes. Does anyone have one question? Someone has got the brilliant mind, can ask the really salient, yes? We're in good with both of those guys, tell you the truth. I don't like to choose, we don't endorse, we're unable to by our charter, and we're not partisan. It's just that all the Democrats are so bad. But, Santorum is great. He's doesn't have a lot of support now, so, but but of Cruz and Trump, they both have great plans. They've both been talking about it a lot. We have no reason to think either of them is insincere, but we don't endorse in any case. I love them both, to tell you the truth, for different reasons. I mean, obviously, Cruz is more the conservative guy, right? Obviously. I understand that, but Trump's got his points too. So. Yeah, if either of those people makes it as president of the United States, I think we will see change at that point. Because it takes a leader. You know, Congress is followers. They're all followers, right? I mean, you got to have a leader, right? So we need to elect a leader, and I'm out of time. You're welcome. It's great to be here. I wish we could talk all night.